So this is January the 28th. 28th. We are in MakerBay PM2, and this is the Sustainable Development Goals, the New Ways for Teaching and Learning talk by Joël Chevrier, Adrian Hassan, Léonore Tournebeuf, and Sophie Penn. Thank you very much.
So very pleased to be here at the MakerBay for the first time for myself, and coming back from Shenzhen, where we've been working with students at the Tsinghua University in the Open Fiesta program. And that's the kind of things I'm going to tell you about. Since we've been working for 1 week doing project and working on the sustainable development goals that I'm going to introduce in a minute. That was a very great experience after the one. People we're working with at the Centre de Recherche Interdisciplinaire in Paris. Did add also with people in Mumbai something like a month ago, working with Vaibhav at the Maker Asylum in Mumbai, and that's also the kind of things we're doing in Paris. And I did also in France in the University of Grenoble. So it means that essentially we're combining these two aspects as having students working around about the sustainable development goals I'm just going to introduce in a second. And the way we try to have them working on that with us is kind of experimental. We explore the way to enter this question with them so that we all learn something. And we try to propose things in these very big objectives and very big questions that are the sustainable development goals. So what's the point about it? Yeah? So we all know that we are living in a world that has several key issues and global problems that we're all concerned about. It doesn't matter if we are in Mumbai or here in Hong Kong, in Shenzhen, in Paris, or anywhere else on this planet. And these sustainable development goals have been identified in the last few years by the United Nations as the 17 key questions that we all share and we all believe we should do things about. And so you have major questions like, of course, clean water, zero hunger, no poverty, just to name a few of them, clean water and sanitation, life below water. And since we are here invited by César, and that is working on coral survival, then the life below water is something that is very sensitive to, and that essentially maybe the kind of project he's working on will be in parallel with what we are doing with the students in all these places. Life on land also, etc. I'll speak a bit about the element one, for example, the sustainable cities and communities. So these questions then not only are very important, but we would like to have the young generation, students, children working and dealing, entering, understanding, and taking care of this. Joël Chevrier, I'm professor of physics in France at university. I behave here as a teacher, and I try and mentor, and I try to be with the students and try to explore with them how we can work on these questions. Because, to me, 2 points we're trying to explore, all of us, with my colleague here present and these students, are the fact that it's just impossible. Two things, it's just impossible to find experts for each of these questions. You're not going to say, okay, easy, I'll find students working on each of these questions or experts working on each of these questions, and then you need to have the needed and recognized knowledge that's associated to each of these questions. This is not the case. All these questions, if you take, for example, the sustainable cities and communities, immediately you have to consider what it is to be in a city, what is entering the city, what's coming out of the city, the way you live in, the way you're moving in, the way you're dealing with air and water, and the whole aspect of life will be there. And if you really want to enter this, then you need to gather people and knowledge from everywhere, which is a good point on this side nowadays, because the knowledge, we can access it anywhere, any time in its whole globality, and that we can find the knowledge very rapidly. But it means that then we are pretty sure, as soon as we are 5 people, that the 6th one will be needed, because there is a knowledge lacking if we just take into account all the meeting of these people with all the knowledge they have. So that's one point, is that we need to having kind of an interdisciplinary method from the scratch, from the very beginning. And that also is a way to say, so how do we have these people with different backgrounds, different ideas working with them? The other thing is that you don't know the way you're going to work on this question. There's no obvious solution immediately. You have to create. And the key words in what we're doing with the students and the teacher, and is going to be shared by the teacher and the students, is that you create your own learning paths in this teaching or in this session that we are doing. Everybody, when we enter, we don't quite know what really we're going to develop, the kind of ideas we'll pick up, and the way we're going to enter. We're just going really to create it. So we're going to create a learning path, because we're going to create the ideas, we're going to create what we would like to do, and we're going also to pick up all the knowledge around so that we can do something. And the third point, so it means that can be a view from an artist, that can be a view for somebody going to build up a startup, that can be something for teacher. You don't know. You're just going to create what you would like to do. And in order to create that, what we believe is that talking or studying is great, very important, but also you have to do so that you're really facing the reality, and that you're really entering what it is to, when you're working with the clean water, or when you're working with energy, then probably the best is to say, what can I do for this clean energy, for example? I'm going to consider how do I enter the fact that I want to get out what has been the production and way to deliver energy to everybody in the world in the 20th century, that you need essentially so big plants, nuclear plants, and big networks, and that sort of thing. So you can start to think about that, but maybe the best way is to say, how can I empower people, maybe everywhere in the world, so that they can even produce their own energy anywhere, anytime, and that's also related to quality education. So what I'm describing now is that this is the complexity of all these questions, that they're connected, that you want to have knowledge from everywhere coming, and that you want also do it for real. I'll just give you an example, one that I show the students, because of course at the very beginning when we started this session, then the one that are used to work in a place like MakerBay, for example, then they say, well, that's life as usual, yeah? Then we're going to answer these questions and we're going to make a great project about it. But most of the students, when they come here, then they say, well, I don't quite understand what we're talking about. So an inspiring project for me is the one that's been developed, for example, by the artist Olafur Eliasson, about what's called the Little Sun Lamp. And the Little Sun Lamp goes to me the 7th, that is affordable and clean energy. He's not the only one working on that. There are many people saying, how can I produce here now light, so that quality education, then I can work at night and study, for example. And the way to do that, you think, okay, I can collect very easily with a solar panel, a little bit of solar panel. I just collect the energy during the day, and I transfer that into a battery. I reverse the stuff during the night, and then I make a LED, and then I can produce the light. This is cheap. You can do it. There's no maintenance. There's no byproduct that you don't like. It's just there. And if you try to have a look on that, and just for this clean energy questions, then you'll find projects like that. Electricity out of plants, or you can start to think about the thermal machine that has been the one I like very much as a physicist, coming from the 19th century, but now in a very local and clean way to do them. So what it means at the end with this example is that, as I said, you need to have people from everywhere, because you don't exactly know what you're going to do, and you need to create. And the same people have kind of a difficulty, even if they collaborate, to create something really new. So you need sharing expertise, sharing ideas, sharing background, sharing life experience. This is something with students, when you tell them you should use your own life experience in that, so that you're going to really put that into your project. This is sometimes somewhat disturbing for them. And then what the way to enter that and the way really to catalyze all these aspects is really, and this is why this is so nice to be here at MakerBay, is that the way is learning by doing. And then you start to do something and you start really to experiment, to do little things maybe, not very ambitious at the very beginning, but then that helps you when you try to work and to test things and maybe to prepare a small device or something like that. Then you go further and further in the discussion and the way to working together to produce a little system that might be also as an example for us, and especially at the Centre de Recherche Interdisciplinaire in Paris. Then we're pretty much also looking at the way to develop kind of a pedagogy about these sustainable development goals. Means that we say to students, what would it be if you were now to organize the same session for kids, so that you even have kids working on the same question with you. Now you're no longer as a student there, but you're also there as a mentor. And we had the pleasure to see, for example, for the sustainable cities and communities, just to tell you during the last week in Shenzhen, so we had students, they chose this one. They say, we want to work on sustainable cities and communities. But they say the first problem we have is that if you speak to people and you say, we're going to work on clean water, it's evident for everybody. If you say that you're going to work on life underwater, it's somewhat evident too. But when you start to say, and especially children, you start to say, okay, we're going to work on sustainable cities and communities, and they say, oh, what are they all about? Yeah, we don't even understand what's going on there. Yeah, but you say, okay, what's the analysis that they say? So the students say, okay, sustainable cities, communities, that essentially mean the city of the future. How are we going to define these new cities? Then we would like to emphasize the fact that they're going to be sustainable and how you gather communities about this project of sustainable cities. So we have to probably have kind of a way for kids to play with these ideas. Yeah, we're not going to teach them from scratch and speaking and that sort of things. We're just going to build something so that they can play with it. Because if these are the city of the future, then they're going to be for the children of the future. Yeah. So what they did at the end is that they say, we're not going to propose any kind of solution for that. We're going to make a game, we're going to produce a device, and that was kind of a real device, something with sensors, and that you can really reshape a city for real in this little device that you can have at school. So what I'm now emphasize here is that you play with knowledge in real time. You do things at the same time. You have people working with different backgrounds, and you have exchange between mentor and between students. And the mentor and the students working together are here to push themselves, yeah, so that to make excitement, and also to say, we can do better than that. We can even push ourselves, and we can propose something that's even smarter than this. And the very idea of having students from different backgrounds, mentors of different backgrounds working together in a learning by doing place is really to push people themselves, so that they're in the excitement and trying to do smarter all the time, so that they produce a project that after the session can be maybe further developed, kind of a proposal, can be exhibited, and we pretty much emphasize, like for example here at MakerBay, so that your project, you're not going to put them after just under the table, but to the contrary, you're going to show them as much as possible, so that other people can benefit in an open way. So this is really also pretty much then open knowledge produce, open device, so that these systems after that they have their own life and can be shared with other people. So pretty much what we try to do is, at the same time, we explore with the students maybe new possibility, new system, new device that can be useful to answer these questions, but we also try together with us to prepare a way of thinking, a way of doing, a way of answering these questions that's based on gathering the knowledge, working together, different backgrounds, and not be linked by any kind of approach that's related to a very well-defined discipline that probably will be too narrow. And this is what we now, I'm not saying that we already have a method and that we can describe and that we can say. we pretty much believe in some aspects. I say the doing, I say that it's the community of sharing knowledge and working together. I said about also the fact, and this is what we try to do when we do that together, and this is what we do here, is that thinking about what we are doing. How can we understand and how can we analyze what we are doing, yeah? And the last point where you are, at, let's say at university, is that how do we do it? And the place where you do it is very important, and I emphasize pretty much the doing. So place like MakerSpace seems to be the place where to do that, and this is what you have in Shenzhen, this is what you have in Mumbai, this is what you have in Paris, that when we do this learning by doing session about the Sustainable Development Goals, that are just learning by doing a Sustainable Development Goals are going together, then this place to do that is really the MakerSpace, or something that you can imagine that is equivalent to a MakerSpace. So if you're interested and you'd like to come on the boat in this, we really believe that this is a challenging way of entering the collaboration between mentors and teacher and student to learn a lot, to create the learning path. I pretty much like this expression of create a learning path. I do believe this is very much the one that is the image of this approach. And then if you're interested to interact with us on this, to collaborate, to discuss, and maybe to do it better with us, and to give us some hint on this, then you're highly welcome. So I would like to very much thank you for being with us and following this little presentation about what we think is something we very much believe in, and will push further anywhere we can. And we'll do it again in different places in the world. So keep in touch about that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Question?
Question?
I have a couple of questions.
Or comments, or adding.
Comments. Yes. My question is about our specific effort during this workshop about the integration between doing and learning, and the question of the integration of the techniques of designing sensors and do-it-yourself materials in relation with the very great challenge, very open challenge, and how the students are able or not to have understanding about the connection between making and learning and acting for the future of the world.
Yeah, that. In fact, I would say this is, as a professor at university, I think this is the kind of things that people like me we need to think about. That's a challenging question. I try to illustrate it. In the people usually we have in this session, then we have people that are pretty much technical, and they're coming from really the tools that the doing is pretty much there, and they know how to do things, and they know how to make, yeah. And on the other side, we have people that are coming, especially in all these questions, the Sustainable Development Goals. Then you need to think about how to put that into society, to interact with people outside, to make it real in society. When you do that, it means that you have to think about all the economical aspect, the law aspect, all these things. And it means that you also gather people that for many of them, when we have the experience of these students, are not well aware of how is the technology operated in our world nowadays. And just to say that the very fact that you say that we all know, but we do not thinking about that all the time, that now during the last 10 years, the planet has been equipped with billions of sensors. That's quite new. It never happened before, yeah? And 10 years ago, they were essentially very limited amount of sensors. Nowadays, it's billion, yeah? And you can say that, so that's first information, and people say, oh, okay, that's right, there's a billion of sensors nowadays. But the second step is to having immediately in this kind of session that we organize, first of all, people playing with the sensors. And when I say that they have to enter and they have to do things, or very little things at the very beginning, maybe not that ambitious, it means that it's also not to become a specialist of this sensor. We don't care that much about that, because you always find somebody to help you in that. But so that you can find somebody to help you in that, you need to understand, you need to grasp what's the reality of this technology, such as sensor, but there are also others aspects of technology. I'm just picking up the example of sensor. And then what you're going to do is that you might have somebody coming from international laws or from economy, business, finance, and you're going to say, let's play with this kind of technology first. Yeah, be a child for a second. And that's what we did last week, yeah? Say, be a child for this morning. Don't worry about any kind of questions, just discover and play. And that's what happened for, let's say, a half a day, even half a day or a day is really something very important. That after half a day or a day, if you've never been playing, for example, with an accelerometer or something like that, then if you do it and if you're able to treat the data in real time and that you have a nice interface, and this is the job of designer together with scientists to define this kind of interface, and we do it, then suddenly you realize what it's all about having, for example, a smartphone. You change the look, you change the way people are looking at the smartphone immediately, because suddenly they see them as a collection, as a set of sensors that are just enhancing your perception and the way you explore the world. Yeah. So, and then when you start to think about a project, then you start better to understand what it is to measure in the world, that it is to use the data, and that it is to maybe put information in all your the questions you're talking about in the sustainable development goals. So you need really to have everybody answering what is to work with reality, with the real world, and the way we use technology and science in that. Was that part of your question?
Yes, but du coup, I have another question in relation with that. We just visited MakerBay and the future of MakerBay, the future MakerBay, and my feeling is that I am now afraid to constate that maybe we have in the university approach of making a set of projects always the same, about water, about the fair sharing of knowledge, the sustainable city, the connected bottle, etc., etc. And I am afraid to have step by step a separation, a distance, very enormous distance between your inspiration and the pedagogical inspiration, because the students have now a collection, a set of projects sur étagère, and the risk is that the real inspiration coming from the community of makerspace are not exactly living in our pedagogical exercise, and how to remain the deep inspiration of the community of makers when the spirit of making becomes university. It is a risk. I don't know that it is the case, but I think that the perspectives are not absolutely excellent about that.
Maybe I can make a comment on this.
Yes.
So my impression is that in a university, when you have a good idea or if you have a bad idea, when new ideas come up, they tend to be protected by the university system. So I mean, it means that even if the idea is not technologically viable or economically viable, it still has a place in academia as research, right? On the other extreme, so for example, if you work at Google X, for example, or X, no, it's Alphabet X, and you develop a technology, it would only be developed by Google if it can become a $1 billion idea, if it can reach more than 1 million people. And I feel that a makerspace is kind of in the middle. It's a little bit protected, as you would have in university, yet it's in touch with the community, and it doesn't have to have the sort of scalability that Google would require. So like this, it's not completely disconnected from reality. It's not billion-dollar technology. It's in between. It's the thing that are directly in contact with the community, but not necessarily that needs to be scaled to the million people. I think it's filling that gap between academia and the large industry.
But it's, maybe adding to what you said is that it's easy. It's the easiest way maybe to think about all these questions is to have the knowledge of what's been done before, because all these questions have been addressed. I mean, the energy is something people produced in the 20th century massively. Establishing a clean water network has been also something that's been done all over the world massively. So it means that we've all been, and still today students and children, that you've been educated. We've all been educated with this idea in mind, yeah? And it's very difficult to get out of this solution, I think. And then not just to be in the transformation of the existing solution and the culture that's coming from the 20th century. And what we are asking here, and where I find your I think I'm in line with your comments, and that we need to enter through this learning by doing stuff, coming from the spirit of makers. We need to enter so that we favor real breakthrough or thinking out of the box completely, and not just coming from the culture, technology, and way of thinking of the 20th century. And that's, I think, it's probably a very big challenge where this meeting of different background and students and mentor is at work. And I'm not claiming we know how to do that. And it might be that also not only question of academic background being there, and not only the culture of makers, but we also need, for example, artists to come in so that they can really have a look with us and create something that we never thought about together with us. I'm not saying the artists are going to do the job for the other. It means that we need people coming from very different ideas, background, lifestyle, and etc. So that for all these questions we can really come to some things that completely out of the box. No poverty, yeah? For people like me, how can I think about no poverty? Yeah? I will have only ready-made question, I would say, that are the classical one coming from the old days, yeah? And I'm just going to solve the question of people, yeah? Am I able to do that? Certainly not.
I have a question about those goals. So I highly respect the Sustainable Development Goals, but I haven't studied them in detail enough to know if attached to the Sustainable Development Goals, are they quantifiable objectives to each of them? So when it says no poverty, it means zero poverty, as in nobody should be poor anymore, or if it's clean water, it means that 100% of the population has, you know what I mean? Like, are they, it's just like the climate change accord. There are some goals attached to it. It's 2 degrees. Is there measurable goals? Because when you have the students, they might be inspired by the themes, but do they have a more specific goal, quantifiable results, so they know that they have made some progress or made a contribution?
I have difficulty with the 17s. It's so diverse and so complex that I think that for most of them, this question is addressed. Yeah, that you try to find a way to measure and have you see progress all during time. But to compare them and say they're all systematically attached to a way of measuring and making sure that they do progress, I will have kind of difficulty to answer that. I'm sorry. Yeah, but yeah, that's an issue. Yeah, that's a question. But we need to think also about that with the students. Means that when you enter with measuring the world and having the question of the data is very important. The way of the quantitative aspect is very important, but if you do that, it also means that this is a way to go to some things that you immediately want to be efficient. So, which might be very important, because being efficient is clearly something you have to do. But you have to combine, for example, the efficiency with empowering of people and new solutions. So it means that clearly the efficiency and having an impact at large scale is something first, probably, and very important. But is that something that you can enter by considering it immediately? Maybe you have to do something like a tour so that you consider the people you're going to deal with and maybe kind of an idea coming from nowhere that's going to be added. And since we're working with the students and that we offer them also to learn during the time they're doing and they're proposing things, then this ability also to really go, you don't know where to propose some things that coming, you don't know, or crazy idea coming, so this is another point. So I do agree that both aspects are important. Look for this efficiency and try to do, but don't go for too much straightforward solution. And I think that people in design, they know that, yeah.
I have another question about the, so let's say, let's imagine, so you have been doing this and you feel confident to do this. But I imagine some other professors, like what you say, like they don't feel confident that they are specialized or qualified because this is interdisciplinary. So what does it take for one person to build that confidence to lead, for example, their research group or their classroom, or to work on those very complicated topics? Like, how do you build that confidence?
That's an open question, because what you said, you're bounded. You can't escape to me this point. The fact is that you can make it the way you want. A proposal that will come will be most of the time not only related to the knowledge in the session. You can gather all the knowledge from the students and all the knowledge from the mentors, and this is not going to be enough to cover all the project. So you don't have the expertise, and even if you have a bit of the expertise, you don't have an expertise deep enough. So it means that in this, you also have to build up and to use science in that case, in the broad sense, and this is what the university might be interested in this, that you have to build up you have to gather the needed knowledge, maybe to identify kind of expertise competence, and then to establish the fact that what you grasp, I don't know where, so on internet or any way you can to gather this knowledge here and now immediately, then you have to make sure it is the relevant one, is going to be useful for a project, and this is reliable, and this is the one you can identify as the robust one. And this is here a very big point, and in the way we're building it. So we don't, that's this way, not only science as an input in terms of knowledge, but science as an input as a critical thinking. And that's the only way I can answer today, I think, is that me, as a professor of physics, most of the time in this kind of session, I do not behave as a professor of physics. I behave more as a, be sure, how can we test, how can we understand, how can we maybe contact somebody, how can we try to establish link between all the knowledge and all the sources you'll find. And this is, I think, where also the maybe the spirit of the university is present in this kind of approach. This is in this. How do we build up the knowledge in real time?
I have another question. I have another question. So out of all these sustainable development goals, so each of them are goals and each of them are sort of independent goals. Which one do you feel most attracted to and why?
Me?
Yes. Which is your favorite box? And why?
I'm not sure I know this question to me. Probably quality education. Yeah.
Quality education. So
yeah.
that's number.
That's number 4. Yeah.
Number 4.
That's pretty much what I do. Quality, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
why?
And compared to what you said, what will be the evaluation of quality education, for example? So quality education, because if I just take my own example, because the questions, then I teach physics. And nowadays I teach physics, and the problem is that, okay, if it is to teach physics to the usual guy doing physics and they're 4th year of the university, then it might be business as usual. We know how to do that, these guys are pretty much committed, and this is not that difficult to do it, I think. But the problem is much more for young children, and also for people who are nowadays might be interested, but they don't have the background, and that we have the tools, we have the possibility, we have the way to represent science, for example, with all the facility we have nowadays, so that we can spread the knowledge much more than before. But that has to be creative. And this is some things I'm very much interested in. To me, this kind of giving the opportunity for people that previously had no access at all to what I teach with each science to suddenly consider what it is, maybe to like it, and to have the opportunity to grasp the spirit and the way to think, so that helps people to analyze and to be in this world together with others and having a new look on it. But how do I quantify that? And first of all, and together with students here, I need to develop this, and I don't claim this is done, and I don't claim at all, that would be the least things, I would claim that I can do that alone. And this is once again exploration, sharing experience with others, and trying to progress. So it's all this, what we are describing to me is kind of a research and collective exploration, and it needs also a lot of collective intelligence.
Can I ask you a question as well? Do you mind if I turn the camera and ask you? So, out of all those, Miss Leboeuf? No, Tournebeuf. So, what is your favorite challenge or goal, and why?
I think it's the 9th. So it's industry, innovation, and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm from engineering schools.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be applied to any subject, such as pedagogy, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I like it is that there are a lot of great ideas coming from a lot of different places,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes we find the way and the moment that everything takes place and works together, and that's why it starts to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
To find this way and this manner to make everything work together.
And so the part of, do you have, what's your engineering focus?
Sorry?
Your focus in engineering is which area of engineering you're into?
In the CRI, I'm a pedagogical engineer.
Pedagogical engineer. Okay, so
that's I work very well with Joël.
I see. So, but Joël has a background in a specific field of the physics, very interested in the education, whereas you're interested in the process of education.
Yeah.
It's just slightly different. But
actually, I've made innovation management, and both are very related because it's always a question of process, according to me, especially. But there are a lot of great ideas that are coming from everywhere, but it's very difficult to find the organization and the way that everything seems works on the right way. So that's what I can bring in those projects.
For people who are coming from the outside, who are interested in the work that you guys do, oftentimes I would imagine, if they are very practical people, that they would expect to see a product, like a very tangible product. But what it sounds like is that the process is the product. Is that fair to say, or do you actually guys come up at the end of this exercise? Do you actually guys come up with services or companies or very tangible, practical way at the end of this process typically?
Actually, I think we couldn't say exactly that. It's my point of view,
I see. Okay.
But it's not. The process is not the main goal.
Oh, okay.
The product, the different teams built were very interesting. Sorry, and that's the whole process is interesting to me because I can bring them some kind of ways of the learning path. But I think the product is also interesting.
Could you describe some of those products, because I think we understand the general framework, but if you give example, I think it will help us to understand what you guys are doing. If you give us more practical, because you said you're doing interesting project.
Okay, I start with anatomy. So there was one team of 5 persons. There was two designers or drawing a very well drawing person.
Illustrator.
Yes, I think, and two or three programmers, and they wanted to talk about animal condition. So they thought about making a huge panel in the metro, in which when you walk, there is a motion recognition, and a cute animal walks and follows you in the panel. And actually, the concrete thing was the process was quite simple because it's motion recognition and there is just a picture. But it raises a lot of interesting questions, such as we mirror animals, so we are like equals, and it's things that appeared during their projects, and the project managed to emphasize this way of thinking. So
I think that's a very good. That's a very good example because it's not finished. This one because it was started last week, and then we'll come back in May, and this is going to be further done. And we pretty much expect that there will be something really done at the end. So that, for example, you could put it in a subway. There was a proposal of students, and it's a nice idea, and also it comes to this, as I mentioned, the culture of the previous centuries, and the culture of previous centuries pretty much, at least, especially in Europe, maybe, the difference between animals and human beings has been established in our culture in a very solid way, I would say. Yeah? And this project here is challenging that. It's trying to really say, what if you were an animal, or just to mirror yourself like an animal, and then you're going to suddenly realize, and of course you make the choice of animals that are really threatened, for example, and then that's established kind of proximity that you would like to do, and pushing you to think about what is your relationship with animals, for example. So that, I think, not only is a good idea, but it's going to be done for real and put somewhere. And the put somewhere will be also a question.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask you some question? Because you're here, we might as well hear from you. So, what is your favorite box in those development goals, and why?
I wouldn't say what's my favorite box because I think they're all very important issues, but maybe the ones that are related to my work, so maybe I can more explain why. So, which is the 9 concerning industry innovation, the 3 for good wealth and well-being, and the 4 with quality education. And in my work, they are all related in a way that my main focus basically is quality education, because we are at the CRI, so we explore new ways to make education, especially using digital technologies, which allows many ways especially to spread the information and to spread open source information. And this is related for me to industry innovation, especially as both engineer and designer. I like to think about new ways to use those technologies, also to develop product design which are easily that you can easily reproduce in any kind of place. So this way you can develop, so as I say, new ways to spread the knowledge, and also new ways to make people handle their education device. I mean that by spreading like plans or details of how you may think, so people will be in the situation to reproduce those, and also to reconsider also what you share to them, because they can directly onto it, and this way also taking into account the fact that digital technologies are more and more affordable for lots of people. I think we can create a way, yes, to make education more equal in terms of development. Make teachers take their device into their hand to create their own scenarios between their own methods, pedagogical methods, and what technologies give to them, and what also other people, so like us, I think, are trying to focus on. And so finally, the 3 is more related to my specific field, which is movement, and so actually especially body gesture, sorry. And this is, in my view, a very good way to interact with education in a way that we all live in this physical world, and I think we have to consider that our mind and our brain is basically made for this physical world, and so to enter through this way is through the sense and motion, the body in general. I think it's a very good way to make notions, and especially educative notions, related to each one. So maybe how I can relate sports to data generations, to mathematics, or maybe also to code programs by developing interactive scenarios, so involving bodies, which also allows me to develop, to make children or any kind of students developing, writing or imaging their own scenarios. So it's very a whole process we can put into, we can develop around the experience of the children, starting from their current world, their physical world. And finally, I would say that I think that the other link with the industry is that, and which is also related to what Joel was talking about before, about the presence of sensors, so more and more sensors, and their affordability. We can so more and more sense what's going on, and especially around the body, which means gesture, health data, or any kind of stuff. And we also have to think about how we have to use it. We all know now that we can take heart pressure, heartbeat sensors, any kind of sensor relating to that. So we know how to quantify our body. Now I think the time is to know to think about what we can do with this. Yes, so I already see those 3 points at the wall, but considering my focus.
That's great. Can I ask you some question?
Non, juste je dirais en français, je vais finir en français,
Okay.
pour dire que cette discussion qu'on a sur quality of education, je pense qu'il faut l'interpréter aussi comme, excuse-moi Jessica, le juste partage des savoirs, et que dans tous les systèmes éducatifs, il y a en ce moment une bataille sur apprendre des contenus ou l'empowerment education. Et cette bataille, elle est très forte dans le monde entier. Et je dis bataille parce que c'est une tension politique, une tension sociale. Qu'est-ce qui est le meilleur pour le futur? Et ce que nous expérimentons dans les défis, c'est finalement la centralité de cette question. Le savoir est disponible, mais personne ne sait vraiment quoi en faire. Et je pense que c'est de ça que nous parlons tous, et que c'est une très belle question. Que dans les étudiants qui nous rejoignent au CRI, par exemple dans le master dont je m'occupe, éducation et technologie, ils viennent de 20 nationalités et ils ont en commun ce constat. Ils disent tous, dans mon pays, les asymétries viennent des inégalités de savoir, et j'ai compris, j'étais formée d'abord en commerce, en technologie, j'ai compris que si on n'attaquait pas la question de qu'est-ce que c'est qu'apprendre dans un monde où l'information est disponible, mais où le sens de cette information et la finalité de cette information n'est pas partagée, on ne peut pas avancer dans ce monde.
Merci.
Can we ask you now a question?
Oh, yeah, to you. Okay. Maybe I finish recording.